We are going to get started. So thank you so much for joining us, everyone. My name is Susana Paredes-Swap. I'm the founder of an all-volunteer nonprofit called Vanguard Culture that works to advance San Diego's creative industry workforce. Vanguard Culture provides quality arts coverage of San Diego's arts and culture community, professional development for creatives, and cultural events that bring diverse communities together and inspire creative collaboration across all industries. For more information, please visit our website at vanguardculture.org. Today, we kick off Vanguard Culture's new initiative designed to support the region's visual arts community, the Art Shop. By using our platform of 7,000 to 8,000 monthly website visitors and over 15,000 weekly newsletter subscribers, we hope to provide artists with the needed visibility and sales to support them through the pandemic and beyond. It has become more and more clear with recent events just how important the arts are during moments of crisis. If you have the means to do so, now is the time to support the arts by purchasing original artwork by regional artists. 25% of each sale goes back to our nonprofit's events and programs that work to advance San Diego's creative industry workforce. We really appreciate your support. We couldn't be more excited to have Bridget Rountree as our first featured artist for the Art Shop. Some of you may remember that Bridget had a beautiful art show installed at Vanguard Culture Headquarters Gallery, which opened on March 14th, 2020, 2 days before the world shut down. Instead of hosting an in-person reception, we held a discussion with Bridget and the show's curator, Kai Essery, via Facebook and Instagram Live. Today, we are very pleased to welcome her back and to give her work the due credit and attention that it deserves. Her two bodies of work, Suspended Landscapes and Valuable Content, couldn't be more timely as they address our human interconnectivity, the fragility of the natural world, and the inevitable breakdown of previously accepted social structures. The artist statement on her website states, "Making art is a way to create meaning, to question systems of thought, and to communicate relationships outside the limitations of spoken language. I engage art historical images as a way to point towards the ideas and philosophies that constitute a visual language, an integration of old and new, nature and culture, thought and action, a revitalization of images as a generative possibility. I'm interested in researching how thought creates form and how the form becomes or manifests itself as an object. I'm looking at how an object suggests how we think, what we believe, and how we live. My work is an inquiry into the way physical forms and patterns become representative of what we know of ourselves, the relationship between the self, the objectified, and nature. Looking at the everyday world with the idea that we are not only passively interacting with the environment, we're actually actively thinking it. What kind of environment is built from the ideology of something specifically made to be consumed, bought, or sold? Using objects that are found, discarded, or deemed no longer useful is important in questioning the foundations of what is deemed valuable in contemporary culture. Welcome to our Art Shop, Bridget.
Hi.
Hi. I see you're in your wonderful studio.
I am.
Surrounded by all that lovely work. So thank you for being a part of this. Thank you for helping us to kick this off. We're very, very happy to have you. Our next guest today is our friend and colleague, Beth Marino. Beth was born and raised in Southern California and has lived in San Diego since 1994. In her nearly 2 decades of museum experience, she has been involved in the development and implementation of over 60 exhibitions and currently serves as the Associate Director of Museum and Visual Arts at the California Center for the Arts Escondido Museum. Beth received a Bachelor of Arts in Applied Design with an emphasis in furniture design and construction in 1999 from San Diego State University. In 2007, she earned a Master of Fine Arts degree in Exhibition Design and a Certificate in Museum Studies from California State University, Fullerton. Beth has worked in small, medium, and large museums and galleries and strongly believes that exposure to art and exhibitions of all types can stimulate the imagination and foster creativity. Displaying engaging collections that are shared by a broad community encourage people to discover and learn together, opening a door that helps us to communicate our feelings, our perspectives, and values. Insight into cultures other than our own provides us with the knowledge and helps us understand our global community and ourselves. Her passion for art and working with the public is coupled with an acute sensibility of how exhibitions are perceived and centers on making the museum goer's experience positive, captivating, and educational. So welcome, Beth, to our Art Shop Talk. Okay, there you are.
There I am.
Wonderful, thank you. So,
hi.
We're so happy to have you, and we know that you and Bridget have worked together in the past, and so you have a history, and we thought this was a wonderful way to sort of kick off and talk about her work. In order to give our viewers, because not everyone is familiar with Bridget Rountree's artwork and her body of work, we sort of agreed that to provide context for the conversation, to kick off this chat with a quick walkthrough of Bridget's 2 bodies of work available for purchase on our website. So ladies, please feel free to add your commentary as we do this, and we will also be able to refer back to these images during your conversation should you need me to do so. You'll just let me know. So, okay, I'm going to share our new art shop. We're very excited to be kicking off today. So this lives now on our website, and as you can see, Bridget is our first featured artist. What you want to do is scroll down here, and you have 2 bodies of work available for scrolling. So we'll begin with valuable content. Okay, here we go. So once you arrive at this page, you have a couple of options. You can either click these down here to view the works, or you can scroll, you can just hover over the image to see the detail, or you can click this magnifying glass and expand the work and just scroll over to the side. So I'm gonna go through these as a slideshow and give you ladies the opportunity to just make any commentary about it or just allow the work to be seen. As you can see, there's these wonderful layerings of meaning here inside of the work. The other body of work is suspended landscapes. So we'll switch over to that one here. Suspended landscapes, again, you can just go in here for some detail. You can scroll here. And all of these works, once you decide that you like one, the cost automatically populates here for you. So let's go in and expand them. So you can see these are cutouts of art history books and then superimposed onto these surreal sort of landscapes. So I am going to stop sharing now, and ladies, the floor is yours. Please take it away.
All right. Well, again, thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you again to Susanna and Bridget for inviting me along with Vanguard Culture today. I'm really excited to be here. I was introduced to Bridget's work a few years ago and immediately loved it right away. Thought, wow, there's something really, really interesting happening here. The type of work and the way she works really spoke to me. But it wasn't until I saw her work in person for the first time that was like this amazing, like, oh my gosh. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here. I assume all of us are art lovers. But you know, you just can't experience art on a screen or in a book the way that you can in person and in front of it. Like, there's an exchange of molecules that happens when you're right there in front of an art piece. And I think that's super true for Bridget's work. And that's one of the things that I really, really love about it. It's really delicate and intimate. And it's just definitely something to be seen in person. Suzanne, I was so happy to see that you can zoom in when you're looking at Bridget's work on your website, because I think it's super important to be able to see all of those details in her work. And they're really, really wonderful. I was lucky enough to work with her. Like you mentioned recently, she was one of, I believe, 21 artists in Endangered, which was an exhibition that we hosted early January of 2020. It was curated by Danielle Deary. So I have to give her credit for curating Bridget into the show and giving me the opportunity to work with her and to see her work in person. My first question for you, Bridget, and I love that you're sitting in your studio. I was going to ask you to describe your studio space. Where is it? How do you structure your day? Are you a night owl? Tell us about just your space that you work in and how you approach it.
Okay, thanks. The studio is, we call it the shop, AKA the Wonder Box. And I share it with my partner, Ian Gunn. And we actually built it from the ground up. It was a 40-foot RV cover, and some friends had bought a property that was 40-foot. It's in City Heights. And we were looking to have more of a permanent shop and expand the shop and our studio space in general. So we asked them if we could build a shop out of this 40-foot RV cover, and that's all that was there. And they said, sure. So we laid the floors, framed out the walls, kind of insulated it. It's really hot right now because it has a basically tin roof, but it's big. It's 700 square feet with 14-foot ceilings. So that's fantastic. As you probably know, I also run a puppet company with Ian. So it gives us a lot of space to stretch out and move around and do not only small works, but large works too. So.
Great. And then how do you structure your day? Do you like give yourself a traditional 8-hour schedule where you're like, I have to be in the studio at this time and I leave at that time, or are you a little more loose about it?
You know, I'm really project based. So I will definitely put in 8 to 10 hours at the shop. I'm great with a deadline. I definitely self-impose deadlines for myself to manage my time, because I am the one who decides what time, when, and where. So it kind of leads to constantly working a little bit, because I also work with my partner. So we're in conversation about creative projects and work and philosophies of work and what we're reading and researching pretty constantly. There's not a big divide between my creative life and my regular life. It's one thing, which is great. So right now I'm usually working at night more so because it's hot in here right now in the daytime. So I've been doing that, but I really like morning hours too, because it's cool. So I work pretty much all the time. It's my main job. Can't help it.
Nice. And has the pandemic and COVID changed anything about the way you work?
Absolutely. It's interesting because we lost a lot of work for sure. And of course, having the exhibition with Susanna at Vanguard, we had to, you know, all of a sudden in a day decide, okay, no, we're not going to have people inside. We're going to Instagram and Facebook Live. So doing this live again is a representation of how the pandemic has changed my life and the way that I work and represent myself to a larger community, which has been interesting. But to be honest, we're busy. And I think in times of loss and in times of anxiety and political strife, that art becomes even more important. Artists are needed more than ever to offer different ways to view the world and different ways to translate the information that we're being pretty much bombarded with on a daily basis. So it has changed quite a bit, and it's brought me a, you know, deeper relationship with you and Susanna as we're trying to figure out ways to continue and to remain vital and to be generative during this time. So, you know, I'm really busy. I'm running to keep up.
Nice. Okay, so I mentioned that one of the many things I love about your work is how intimate it is. And from an exhibition design standpoint, I can definitely see how important it is in a museum or gallery space to allow the viewer to feel comfortable enough to walk up to your work, to stand close to it, and to have the time to experience all of the details. Your work isn't the type of work that you can just glance at and appreciate. You really need to spend time with it. Can you talk a little bit about the intimacy of your work and how the size and composition really invite the viewer into your work?
One thing that I always have been drawn to and love is when you know, walk by something and you think it's one thing, maybe from a distance, but then as you get closer, you realize that it's another thing, which is kind of the basis of mixed media. A lot of my work, what I'm researching conceptually, art historically, theoretically, is the way that I physically approach making the work. So the form mirrors the thought behind it. And the basis of mixed media, like in valuable content, is, you know, basically a lot of it is removing something out of the image. So it's taking the visual image and looking at what that is suggesting, again, socially, politically, emotionally, who's telling this story, what is the idea behind it. You know, images are not innocent in that way. They are loaded with ideologies, biases, winners, losers, you know, all those structures that we live by. And so by removing a piece of it or interrupting what that original image was expressing and putting another image in. So, and therefore you create a third meaning. So the work lives on in a different way. And I think that process of actually, you know, interrupting the image, and I have a large, hundreds and hundreds of mixed media images that are cataloged. So you have to have many, and then then you start doing visual analogies with them. So what does that change the context if I put this image in there, if I put this man, or if I put this animal or this abstract landscape? What does that do to that original image? And it is a process of translating those two images together to create the third thing, which is the basis of mixed media.
Definitely. And I love, there's one nice example, I don't know if we can get to it real quickly or not, of the two faces. There's a male and a female, and they're facing each other, and you have like ledgers almost behind them. And then it looks like you've used the negative space from those images in then a second piece. And again, like you were saying, how it changes the meaning behind the pieces depending on what you're putting behind them. Let's see, keep going. It's this one here, and then the next one, I believe. Yeah, can you talk a little bit about these two? Do you see them as two separate pieces, or do you really see them more connected because you are using the negative space?
In these pieces, I see them as connected. I see them as kind of diptychs of each other. Definitely they work, but I don't always do that. I always save the negative cutout images as well as the, forefront image that I'm cutting out. I always save them because, again, the way you read it, as opposed to reading the numbers behind in the background to actually being in the foreground with the figure, changes, I believe, the way that we kind of process this information. And those two together kind of become representative of that for the viewer a little bit. So I like these works to be together, but I don't always work in that way. But these two, yes, definitely.
Yeah, I like this example of that. Okay, so we're focusing mainly today on two of the series. And while they have visual differences, they still definitely have that Bridget Rountree fingerprint on them. And can you talk about the difference in those two series? One seems to be much more planned out and deliberate. That would be the valuable content, but correct me if I'm wrong. And then in your suspended landscapes, it's much more spontaneous. At least the landscape portion of it is much more spontaneous. Can you talk to us about how these two differing methods speak to the larger narrative of your work?
Valuable content, again, is, I touched a little bit on it, is a mixed media based practice, which is precise. It's, I have a really small swivel knife where the little blade will move. So everything has to be cut somewhat meticulously so that two images read together. So the idea is to make it one composition. So you're working with two kind of divergent images in that way. But when you're making the final piece, I'm always looking for the composition to be balanced, to make sure it's tonally correct, that the lines of the hair match up with the lines of the coat. So when you first walk by, you don't necessarily, like you were saying, you don't necessarily see the embedded image. That's the hope, is that it looks like it is just one completed image. And then as you move in closer, you start to see that there's something else going on than what maybe you originally thought. And again, and the way that I work, the physical form the work takes matches my thought process of how I'm thinking about it. So in mixed media, it is, it lends itself to being political because you are interrupting an image that has a very specific message, art historically or socially or politically. It's a very immediate form. So it's found imagery. So I can use newspapers, magazines, postcards, all of these things that I use also become, it's an immediate form in that way. It doesn't cost a lot of money, and you don't have to know yourself how to paint or draw, though it is helpful to understand the practicalities of making art and what you're working with, like form, tone, perspective, all of that comes in to the work. And with suspended landscapes, was the thought behind that, and what I was interested in researching was chance. So I became very interested in emergent structures and researching forms that are always present. And I found that to be really interested. And I was also reading kind of new narratives on ecology, where we as humans fit or are connected with the rest of nature. And that there are these also systems and structures that are always present, that I wanted to visually translate that act into the work. So it has that feeling of spontaneity because it's literally spilling different inks. So I'll mix up different inks and tones, and then it's a chance, I spill them, it's not, and then I respond. So the materiality of what I'm doing becomes really, really important. Actually, the ink, the water, I use sticks and scratch in a little bit, but it was also an interest in decentering as a human. I think that's really important right now for us to understand. And I think we are getting a good taste of that with the pandemic, the fact that we aren't in control and time doesn't revolve around us and we are not invincible in that sense. And this work definitely is an inquiry into those questions of what are these systems and structures that are already present, that are not man-made and do not follow rational thinking or an intention of I'm going to do this. So it was a way to decenter myself and really take that on myself and in my work of what appears and how can I be in a very present relationship with it without having to, kind of push it into form, but that the form is there. And then of course the mixed media and the human figures become much smaller in this body of work, and they're situated in a larger landscape where they're relational to what is going on. They're not the ones imposing the structure on the image or in this landscape or form. They're enveloped by that, which feels timely right now because I do feel that way on a day-to-day basis. And again, the pandemic has definitely exacerbated that feeling and brought it to the forefront.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you work on both series simultaneously, or was there one first and then the second one?
The first series was valuable content. Out of these two series, the first one was valuable content. And then I started working 2 years later on this series of suspended landscapes. So they're different. And the form of it again is different because my inquiry and what I was researching and concerned with was different.
And are you still continuing both of these series, or have you moved on?
I'm working on a new body of work, but who you are and I can't forget that work. So inevitably it is contained in it. But I am working on a new series of work that is both painting side, and I'm working on both simultaneously now, actually. I'm doing a series of mixed media work and I'm doing a series of painting because painting is also something different. And I say painting, drawing, ink, drawings, things like that. They're different point of discovery or way to enter and to read images and to translate that imagery. So they have a different feeling, I guess. And I'm hoping, I've been working with two South African artists for over 17 years. They go by the name artistically of Rose and Claire. Rose Shakanowski and Claire Gavronsky are South African artists who live part-time in Italy and part-time in South Africa. And they have always instilled a sense of continuing to be curious, to not get complacent and comfortable once there's a trap to create. Once you have a form and you can make a formula out of it and recreate those images or that technique again and again. I don't have a technique. I have a curiosity and a desire to learn and grow. And so I'm always taking workshops. I just did 2 workshops. Another pandemic win, if I can say that, was that I had the time to actually do these workshops. I was actually supposed to be in Italy doing these workshops, but, and they're always pushing to see something just outside the edge of what you know, or to have that inquiry and to remain curious and to take risks. And so hopefully the work continues to get better technically as I learn more, and will constantly be in these workshops and doing things to, you know, just the basic of perspective and tone and color, and how is a composition balanced, and then what if you want to comment on it being unbalanced. So yeah, so the work is just going to continue in that way.
I love that. We're considering these two particular series. One is primarily about the environment, and the other has more of the socio-political overtones, although I guess you could argue that both of those are sort of the same category these days. Do you ever feel nervous about putting yourself out there to be critiqued, not just as an artist, but about some of the subject matter and the message of your work? And as a follow-up question, how do you address critics who say your work is, say, too political?
Well, do I worry about it? Well, sure. I mean, to a degree, I guess I worry about it in some aspects, but no more than I would worry about people liking me, or kind of this basic sense of wanting, you know, that need. I want to be successful. I want people to like my work. I want people, you know, I mean, all those basic human things, yes. But I want to, I think it's a compliment if somebody says your work's too political, or has something to say. I mean, honestly, most people are not overly critical of it, which is too bad, because I'm critical of it. I'm critical of what I'm reading and how I think, and what images are saying and doing, and the power of images in that way. I you know, it's a language and a study, just like any other job, in that sense. So I haven't had too much of that. No, I mean, I can't say that it's not something that people often say to me, is your work is too political.
And do you, what do you feel like the obligation of an artist is to address, say, hot button topics in their work, if they do?
Well, there's lots of different types of art. Some art is not meant to do that, you know, or doesn't have that foot forward. Like within mixed media, I was saying that form lends itself to being political. It arose art historically to be political and comment on society, on the way they were being governed, on the horrors of war. It's been used that way for hundreds of years, or 100, I guess. So the role for me is to translate what is being presented within a visual language. That I feel is my job, and I feel I guess a moral responsibility to comment on inequalities that I see within a visual language. From an artist's perspective, I'm not an art historian. I'm not steeped in political science, or, you know, I come from a very specific line of thinking and a perspective and an education, which is in visual art. And so I feel like that's my job, is to comment and to offer other ways of seeing things. I mean, I think that's what, you know, part of saying, oh, artists are really important right now, is that it's a different way of thinking. And a visual language works by different systems of value. And it has the possibility to change minds. And so I feel responsible because I'm putting this work out there. And what do I want to support as a person and as an artist? What paradigms am I representing? What structures of thought? What, you know, racism, sexism, also, you know, chance and spirituality in forms of being able to take something invisible and make it visible. That work is different. That's more of like the spill type of stuff, working with kind of the unknown and the unseen. So I think good artwork usually does that. It's, you know, again, going back to the mixed media, you take two things and you put them together and create a third image. It's something else. And it's not the face value of the image. It's what it's communicating. It's the thing hovering between the viewer and the artwork. So you never directly point at it, right? You can't describe and, you know, define love or beauty or spirituality in that sense, but you can point at it. You can suggest, you can offer something that's, you know, it's hard to talk about because it's not a tangible thing in that way. It's in between material and immaterial.
And I think your work does that in a really special way that, you know, in my opinion, I think it does invite viewers to contemplate subjects that maybe, whether they agreed with or not, the way you present your work feels very approachable, I think, and very relatable. So I definitely appreciate that. You utilize a lot of recognizable historical artworks and images in your work, but you're obviously changing the original context. And so we talked about that a little bit. Do you think that beyond the aesthetics, do you think that that helps convey a deeper meaning in your work by using things that people recognize and changing that context? And have you ever thought what will happen, you know, 100 years from now, some of the images you're using are say 100 or more years old, if someone took your work and changed the context of it to update it for, you know, 100 years from now?
I would love that. That would be great. I would love to see what other artists do in that sense. That is the lineage of mixed media that I have always loved, and I wouldn't mind that at all. I think that art historical imagery, again, comes loaded with all the ideology of that time. What was the political system of power? What was the day-to-day life of a person doing? What were they dealing with? And it's also important for me to work in the lineage of visual arts. I love that. It's a rich, rich history, which is a lifetime of study. And there's been so many great artists, far better and brighter than I am, that have made visual work and that have written about it and that studied those philosophies of the time scientifically, socially, philosophically. So, and that's there within history. It's a great inspiration. You know, artwork doesn't come, I'm not inspired 100% of the time. It doesn't come from my own gut. It has a lineage of people who have walked before me, who have been concerned and working in a visual language. And I think that's important. And there's also it's called valuable content, to point towards a content within an image that it is loaded and it does make it different and it shapes who we are and how we see ourselves in the world. And art historically, there's all these different manifestations of that, you know, from portraiture work and the Renaissance. Why did that come about? Who was painted? Who was left out? You know, what morality was being given for you to follow, right? These are moral and ethical guidelines for us as humans to follow. We're visually very centric. I'm reading Art and Perspective right now by Arnheim, of just the psychological effect of how humans see things on a 2D frame. What looks balanced, what looks, you know, imbalanced, what puts a viewer at ease. You know, what is shape? What are those principles? What is tone, color? What are those principles? How do we see it? Why do we see it the way that we see it? And art history is an amazing resource of all of these ideas that have been considered in different ways. Art movements change when ideas change philosophically, and they move together, right? Art, literature, science, they all interrelate. And so to me, I love using art historical imagery in that way because it gives me a pointed time to look at and philosophy of what was going on at that time and why they were doing that. Like when abstract expressionism rose, why was the loss of that form? Where was the move there historically from the figure being the ultimate, the strive for enlightenment, right? Was the human form. And then you move into abstract work. Why an abstract then work comes about? Why the loss of the figure? Why now is color the ultimate, or truth to materials, right? The paint, Stella came and just the paint, nothing else. You know, why are these visual representations there? And they're there by a way of thinking. That's why I let, you know, that what I'm researching and what I'm concerned with becomes the physical form of the work.
Right. And I love how you combine those Frank Stella pieces with those more Renaissance, which kind of speaks exactly to that point that you're making. And how art is really in response to what's happening around us in the world, but it's also in response to what the artists before us came and had to say, and wanting to push those boundaries and do something different, which one of the things that, you know, I think really speaks loudly in your work, and I really appreciate it. So talk to me about some of the more memorable responses that you've had to your work.
Oh man. Memorable. I mean, it's always lovely to have a conversation with somebody about the work who sees something in it and relates to it. Whether that's more of a kind of social, political, mental, or if it's a feeling that's been, you know, kind of stirred within them of what they see. I love hearing the different translations of my translation, which is what they think the work is about. And what comes up for them. I'm
sorry.
When I first showed valuable content, a person, it was in a gallery that you could kind of come in off the street. And so people that I didn't know, and I would sit there and have gallery hours, mostly alone. But you sit there with the work and every once in a while someone would walk in and just, I might say hello or something, but they would just scan the work. And one day this man walked in and he looked at the work and he said, you know, thank you for saying that. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for, you know, putting that work out there. And but it felt like a really memorable thing just because I didn't know him. He wasn't a friend. He wasn't, you know, he was just somebody kind of walking by who had no idea and felt reflected in the work. And that's a big hope. And you know, I make work to communicate with other people and to be in relationship with the world. And, you know, so that's a good memory.
Yeah. Do you remember the first piece of art that you sold?
Oh gosh. That's a good question.
I feel like that would definitely be your, like, you know, especially if it was, you know, sold, like you said, to someone who you didn't know.
No, I have now, you know, it's been almost 20 years. I don't know. I don't even remember. I don't.
Okay. Talk to me about the artwork that you most identify with. Is it a wide range of things? Are you looking mostly to contemporary art? Obviously, you're using art historical references in your pieces, but what really draws you into a piece of art?
You know, it's funny. I always have a hard time with, you know, what do you most identify with as an artist? Because again, I'm going to say that it depends on what I am researching and interested in. So, you know, when looking at chants and uh, emergent structures and what that looks like is usually more abstract, and it's dealing with time. I've always loved John Cage for that. He's a big one for me in that sense, even though it was more performative and sound-based, it still translates to me visually. So I research the images that I have, and then that again dictates what I look at. So if I'm looking for art historical images of portraiture or contemporary, you know, it's great to mix art history and contemporary images in that way, because as I think as humans, we've been dealing with the same things. Of course, there's nuances and changes, and we have technology and things, but this is not the first pandemic we've lived through as humans. And, you know, there's universal themes of living and dying and power grabs and ego and human centricity of where that started. And so the idea behind the work usually dictates what I'm looking at visually.
Is there much crossover with your puppetry work and your visual art?
Yeah, definitely. I'd say William Kentridge is probably one of my all-time favorite artists, because he really bridged the gap, and so to speak. And he worked with, early on in his career, he worked with a puppet company called Handspring Puppet Company. And William Kentridge did all the visual projections, as he does animated drawings that would support the show. And I've always loved crossover. I mean, I always say mixed media is kind of the ultimate, because you can, you know, you have the entire art historical contemporary imagery, everything's kind of at your fingertips to manipulate. And puppetry is also something that it's not much of a different process than how I treat my visual artwork. It's all the same thing in that sense. And it's very material based. So it's taking a lot of found objects, clay, cardboard, tape, hot glue, and then you joint it, and you have to move it and manipulate it around and see what it can do. You can't be too bossy. It can only do what it can do. And then it can speak to you and tell you what it can do if you're listening. Kind of like the spills. If you listen and look and are awake, you see things in that way. And puppetry kind of lives in that between world also. It's kind of uncanny. It's not human, but it evokes humanness. It's alive and also dead at the same time. You have to suspend your disbelief and imagination, and it you know. So yeah. I think I approach them the same way.
I see a real connection. It's almost like your cutout figures are puppets within your, 2D world versus the 3D world that you work in. So I definitely see that connection there. Susanna, I want to be respectful of our time. How are we doing?
Yeah, I think we're doing well. This might be a good time to open it up for questions in the chat. So our interns may have sent you questions that have gone through the chat. Go ahead and check that. And also on Facebook, if you're joining us on Facebook Live, please go ahead and include your questions in the chat box, and our wonderful intern, Daniela, will relay them to Beth for you.
I also wanted to say that we're working on a series of short videos right now for the La Jolla Playhouse's Digital Without Walls series. And those will be on social media for viewing for free. And it's a series of 6 episodes of short live action puppetry videos about an underground world and 6 kind of unsuspected characters coming together, and just by being who they are on an adventure to, I can't spoil it, but to a secret underground world. So check those out.
Cool. Very cool.
I've been watching them. They're great.
Thanks.
Oh, it's from Patricia Fisher. Hi, Patricia. We know each other from NCAN, North County Arts Network. So she asked, can you speak more about puppetry and how that relates to any of the artwork?
Yes. Well, how does it relate to my artwork that I haven't said? Well, I would say the same thing about puppetry that I did about visual work, that it's kind of the ultimate mixed media, because you paint, you draw, you sculpt, you consider lighting, manipulation, there's a live performative element. So to me, it's taking a lot of disparate actions and courses of study and putting them into one. The great thing about puppetry is, well, often is live performance, but for right now with doing the videos, is that you can create a series of images very quickly. And you actually, film is a little bossy because you are controlling the viewer's eye. So I would say this is kind of leading into one of the differences within making visual work that sits on a wall, 2D or object still, but that's static. Whereas in film, you're working with all the same principles. Is the frame balanced? Are the tones and colors right? Does it, it's the same type of perspective, right? It's kind of transferable from 2D to the stage to film. They're all a visual language. So that interest in those overlaps are feeding each other all the time. And I think it's helpful to, I think, jump and move between mediums, because they are all different and they all have a different form, but they all inform each other at the same time too. And that's really helpful.
It makes me think a little bit about, you mentioned that you and your partner work together on the puppetry things, and then you work, I'm assuming, solo. Is that a hard transition to make, where you have to, agree with someone or agree to disagree with their ideas as you're putting things together, versus being able to have that final say because your 2D art is just you and your puppetry work is with, a second person?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I always feel in collaboration, even when I'm making visual art. I know people say you do it alone, and you do, sort of, but you have all of your players, just like in, having puppet characters. Like, the images are my players, and it's in a dialogue with that, right? It's not made from a vacuum or something that, oh, I just want to make a pretty picture, so I'm gonna doodle some watercolors, right? So they're all players and they're all actors and they all have their message and kind of vie to be seen. The great thing in working alone is that I get to be the director, and I get to have the final say. So though it's collaborative, yes, it is easier in that sense. Though I definitely get feedback from my work, and I am part of these workshops that I was mentioning in Italy and South Africa. And there's a group of women who are also, I've been with for 17 years, and we get together, we discuss theory, reading, we put our work up so we can look at it and have a critical dialogue around it. That's near and dear to my heart. And I can't imagine not having that relationship with other professional artists now. But when working with Ian, I mean, we live together and work together. So that's a lot to ask from any relationship. And we definitely have strong opinions, and we get to navigate how to work with those opinions and different ideas all the time. So, but it's great because 2 minds are better than 1, 3 is better than 2. So the more you add, it's any artwork too is collaborative. I mean, I feel like my teachers are in this artwork. I wouldn't have made it on my own. So I feel like a collaborative artist in general across puppetry and visual art, but there's subtle differences there for sure.
Yeah. So we did have a question. Someone was asking about how to buy your work, and it sounded to me like we can purchase pieces through the Vanguard website, and that 25% of that was going to them. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. So
Perfect.
I'll actually do another screen share. So I'll show you where, if you go to Vanguard Culture on our website, vanguardculture.org, you will see the art shop right there on the main page, and that'll take you here, which is the landing page about what we do, a little bit about Bridget's, her bio, and then you'll see the two different bodies of work here. So if you were gravitating toward valuable content or suspended landscapes, and then once you get into the place that you want, we'll say it's valuable content. Once you arrive here, then again, you have the option to either zoom in to the detail to these pieces. You can scroll here. And then once you know which piece you like, you can select that option and then add to cart and make the purchase. And 25% of the sale does go back to Vanguard Culture. We're a 501c3 nonprofit that works to advance the creative industries of San Diego. So it definitely helps, and now is the time to support artists by purchasing original artwork by regional artists. This is the time to support your arts community if you have the means to do so.
100%. And then it looks like we had a nice question from, was it Bill? Yeah, Mr. Bill Pierce. He asked if you keep a daily sketchbook, or do you have any other daily practices that you do?
Yes, well, again, it's kind of project-based. Ian and I have been working full board on getting the puppet videos together. We're shooting 5 and 6. They launched a couple weeks ago, but we are still in process of doing that. So yes, I have a practice of reading. I have a practice, you know, with that reading, I'm usually taking notes and writing, and I toggle between kind of contemporary theory, and then also, I don't know, how would I describe it? A little bit more poetic or with spiritual undertones. So I said earlier, I'm reading Art and Perspective by Arnheim right now, which is not dry, but it's the psychological. It's like the mechanics of how your eyes look at things, and just the basics of how we view images on the page or on the screen, 2D. And then I'm reading Braiding Sweetgrass, which is a book by an Indigenous woman who, it's beautiful and just inspiring and makes me want to cry a little bit at the end of every chapter. This morning I was reading it, and it was about language and an Indigenous language. Some of them, not all of them. She's Ojibwe, and their language is comprised of 70% verbs, which is living. So you have to conjugate all those verbs. It's a much more complicated language than the English language in that sense, because the English language is comprised of 70% nouns in our language. So that's a person, place, or thing, right? And the only thing that's living within that trinity is personhood, which is human. So in the English language, we only privilege something being alive or animate with human. So in the Ojibwe language, she was saying that a tree is not a thing, it's not inanimate, it's living, it's to be a tree. So, and that just struck me as, you know, when you're thinking about psychologically how, you know, talking about form and language, shapes, visual, shapes how you think and how you live, you know, that what would it be like if we had a language that animated life around us besides human and gave it that respect and importance and truth of you know, being there. So I like to hold both those things for sure, because they spark different things for me. And then I'm usually taking notes about that stuff. I don't necessarily like personally journal, but I keep a note of what, like the new work I'm working on, I'm writing about what it is I'm researching and how that's, because it influences what images I'm choosing and what content I'm working with, or what form I'm working with, if I'm doing abstract works or I'm painting as opposed to doing kind of mixed media or text and mixed media text-based works. So my practice is that, and then I'm usually we take one day off a week right now. And other than that, my daily practice is in the studio, either making visual artwork or puppetry right now.
Fantastic.
Well, I think in the interest of time, we're right at the 1 hour mark. It's probably, we'll have to wrap up. We do encourage you to visit our website for more information. Of course, we want to extend a huge thank you to our two speakers, our featured artist, Bridget Rountree, and Beth Marino, the Associate Director of Museum and Visual Arts of the California Center for the Arts, Escondido. Thank you to the California Center for the Arts, Escondido, for allowing us to feature your wonderful director. And as a reminder to all of you, the artworks on view today are available for purchase. They are beautifully framed behind museum quality glass. They're ready to hang. They include free delivery for San Diego residents, and 25% of the sale, again, comes back to Vanguard Culture. So if you'd like to peruse these beautiful works of art, go to vanguardculture.org. You may follow us on social media at Vanguard Culture, at Culturally Savvy, or visit vanguardculture.org to be a part of our season. So thank you all again for joining us on your lunch hour. We really appreciate you. Thank you for your support of the arts, and be well.
Thank you so much. This was so great. Thanks again for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Susanna and Beth. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Wonderful. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.